The Galactic Confederation's zero-gravity gauntlet hung suspended in the void between Proxima Centauri's binary stars, a twisted labyrinth of crystalline barriers, electromagnetic fields, and gravity-shifting chambers that had broken the pride of 12 sentient species. For 87 cycles, the course remained unconquered, a testament to the engineering genius of the long-vanished Aldebaran architects who had built it as both assessment tool and cultural touchstone. Commander Vrexel of the Taurian Defense. Bleat adjusted her breathing apparatus and glared at the holographic representation hovering before the assembled delegates. "The course is impossible by design," she announced, her forearms gesturing at the complex three-dimensional maze. "My species has sent 17 champions. The Morkali sent 23. The Phobians, with all their vaunted gravitational adaptability, failed 41 times. Laughter rippled through the delegation hall as Ambassador Krith of the Phobian Collective bristled, the spines along his dorsal ridge flaring in irritation. "Perhaps," interjected High Counselor Dozerin, his crystalline form refracting light across the chamber, "we have been approaching the challenge incorrectly. The gauntlet was not designed for combat specialists, but for problem solvers." A murmur of disagreement filled the chamber until a voice spoke from the observation deck, quiet yet somehow cutting through the noise. "Or perhaps you're overthinking it." All eyes, optical sensors, and sensory apparatus turned toward the source, a lanky figure in the simple grey jumpsuit of the newly admitted Human Exploratory Alliance. Unlike most delegates who had arrived with entourages and ceremonial guards, the humans had sent only 2 representatives to this gathering. The speaker, Rodan Dax, stepped forward, brushing a strand of copper-colored hair from his face. His companion, Dr. Isolde Morrow, chief xenobiologist for the Alliance, winced visibly at his informality. "Lieutenant Dax," she whispered, "perhaps this isn't the moment to—" "When will it be the moment, then?" Dax countered, eyes fixed on the holographic gauntlet. "We've been observing protocol for 3 months while being treated as barely sapient curiosities." High Counselor Dozerin's crystalline structure flickered with diplomatic patterns. "The human delegate wishes to speak. By Confederation tradition, all voices may be heard." Dax nodded his thanks. "I've studied your gauntlet schematic since our arrival. Every champion has approached it the same way, forward progression through predefined segments." Commander Vrexel's upper arms crossed defensively. "That is the only logical approach. Maybe for species evolved in hierarchical societies," Dax replied, stepping closer to the hologram. His fingers traced the intricate pathways. "But has anyone ever considered moving backward through it?" The chamber erupted in multiple languages, translation devices struggling to convey the mixture of outrage and amusement. "Preposterous. A complete misunderstanding of the challenge. Typical primitive thinking." Dr. Morrow closed her eyes briefly, but Dax continued undeterred. "The gauntlet doesn't just test physical capability, it tests conceptual limitations. I've analyzed the energy fluctuations recorded during previous attempts. The resistance increases proportionally to forward momentum." Dozerin's crystalline form pulsed with interest. "You suggest the course was designed to punish conventional approaches?" "I don't just suggest it," Dax replied with a half-smile. "I intend to prove it." Commander Vrexel snorted through her breathing apparatus, bold words from a species still using chemical propulsion when they arrived at our outpost. "Bold words," agreed Ambassador Krith, spines settling. "But I admit, I'm curious. The Confederation Charter permits any delegate to attempt the challenge." "Then I volunteer," said Dax, stepping forward. "I'll attempt your gauntlet tomorrow, and I'll start from what you consider the finish line." As the chamber exploded with wagers, debates, and diplomatic protests, Dr. Morrow grabbed Dax's elbow. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "You're risking—" Not just your career, but humanity's standing in the Confederation. Dax's expression grew serious. For 80 years, they've watched us from afar, deciding we weren't ready. Now they've reluctantly let us join because they need our asteroid mining techniques. If we want respect, Isolde, we need to show them humanity thinks differently. Different doesn't mean better, she warned. No, Dax agreed, watching the agitated aliens debate his challenge. But sometimes it means finding solutions where others see only problems. Dawn cycle aboard the Confederation station Harmonious Exchange brought with it a buzz of activity unusual for the normally regimented habitat. Word of the humans' challenge had spread through all 12 decks, prompting off-duty personnel to jockey for observation positions and setting off a flurry of resource exchanges as wagers were placed on the outcome. In his assigned quarters, Rodan Dax completed his 200th one-armed push-up, his body sleek with sweat, despite the chamber's cool temperature. He flipped to his feet in a single fluid motion, surprising Dr. Morrow as she entered. "Don't you believe in doors?" he asked, reaching for a towel. "I chimed 3 times, she replied, setting down a portable holographic projector. "You were too busy with your primitive calisthenics to notice," Dax grinned. "Nothing primitive about functional strength. The gauntlet's primary defenses are electromagnetic, meaning my muscles won't be affected like robotic assistants would be." Morrow activated the projector, creating a miniature version of the gauntlet in the center of the room. "The Council has agreed to your attempt, though most consider it diplomatic courtesy rather than a serious challenge." "Perfect," Dax said, studying the rotating model. "Underestimation works in my favor. You realize Commander Vrexil has offered to extend our probationary status by another full cycle if you fail. She claims your reckless approach demonstrates humanity's unfitness for full membership." Dax circled the hologram, his expression focused. "And if I succeed, then the Taurians will withdraw their objection to our technology-sharing proposals." Morrow sighed. "It's a high-stakes gamble, Rodan." "Life's a high-stakes gamble," he replied absently, his fingers tracing a particular section of the course. "Have you noticed this portion here? The way the barriers are aligned?" A chime at the door interrupted them. When it slid open, the towering form of Quetzal filled the frame, 6 iridescent appendages folded in the formal greeting posture of the Avalonian Cooperative. "Lieutenant Dax," the alien's melodious voice reverberated, translation device barely necessary, given the Avalonian's gift for languages. "I come with counsel, if you will receive it." Dax gestured the massive being inside, where Quetzal had to duck beneath the human-proportioned ceiling. "The Avalonians haven't attempted the gauntlet in 30 cycles, Morrow observed. "Not since champion lawkeeper Astrith was injured." Quetzal's compound eyes dimmed momentarily in acknowledgement. "Astrith was my clutch kin. Her nerve centers never fully recovered." Dax straightened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "She lives still, though diminished," Quetzal corrected. "I come not to discourage, but to offer perspective. I have observed your species since first contact. You possess adaptability beyond logic." "That's one way of putting it," Morrow muttered. "Your backward approach," continued Quetzal, moving closer to the hologram, "has merit that others dismiss. The gauntlet was created by the Aldebrands, who perceive time as fluid rather than linear." One appendage gestured to the crystalline barriers. "These are not mere obstacles, but conceptual filters." Dax's eyes narrowed. "Filters for what?" "For determining which species might eventually locate the Aldebaran homeworld." Quetzal's voice dropped to a whisper. "The gauntlet is not merely a test, it is a key." Morrow stepped forward. "That's not in any Confederation record." "Not all knowledge is shared, even among allies," Quetzal replied. "My ancestral memory contains truths the Council finds inconvenient." Before either human could respond, the station's announcement system chimed. "Lieutenant Rodan Dax of Earth is summoned to pre-challenge assessment." All observers are directed to viewing deck Alpha. Quetzal's appendages rippled. Remember, human, the Aldebrands valued perception above all else. Their puzzles require one to see what isn't there, rather than overcome what is. After the Avalonian departed, Morrow turned to Dax. What did that mean? Dax was already pulling on the specially designed pressure suit he'd had fabricated for the attempt. It means, he said with quiet certainty, that I was right. The gauntlet isn't about strength or speed, it's about breaking conceptual boundaries. And if you're wrong, his eyes met hers, serious beneath his usual confident demeanor, then humanity waits another decade for full admission, and I spend the rest of my career filing reports on some backwater monitoring station. He sealed the final connection on his suit, but I'm not wrong. As they walked toward the launching bay, whispers followed them, some curious, some derisive. Commander Vrexil stood at the airlock entrance, her 4 arms holding ceremonial verification. Instruments, human, she said, the translation barely masking her condescension. Are you prepared to withdraw your challenge? There would be no dishonor in recognizing the limitations of your species. Dax smiled as he accepted the helmet from a technician. I appreciate your concern, Commander, but sometimes limitations exist only because we believe in them. The gauntlet hung before him in the vacuum of space, massive, intimidating, and beautiful in its complexity. From Dax's position in the preparation chamber of the Confederation observation post, the structure resembled a massive crystalline neuron, with pathways branching and reconverging across nearly a kilometer of space. Final systems check complete, came Dr. Morrow's voice through his comms. Oxygen recyclers at optimal levels, thermal regulation stable, neural interface syncing at 97%. Dax flexed his fingers inside the specially designed gloves. Unlike the heavy exoskeletons previous competitors had worn, his suit was lightweight, favoring flexibility over protection. How's our audience? Full house, Morrow replied dryly. The viewing deck is at capacity. 3 Confederation councillors have arrived to witness personally, and Commander Vrexil is monitoring from her command ship. Of course she is, Dax muttered. He completed his final equipment check and moved toward the airlock. Initiating in 3, 2, Roden, Morrow interrupted, her voice suddenly personal rather than professional. Whatever happens out there, what you're doing matters. For all of us. He nodded, though she couldn't see it. Keep the champagne. Cold, Doc! The airlock cycled open, and Dax pushed himself into the void. Instead of using thrusters immediately, he allowed momentum to carry him toward what all previous competitors had considered the endpoint of the gauntlet, a shimmering, hexagonal portal surrounded by pulsing energy barriers. From the observation deck, voices raised in confusion. "What is the human doing?" demanded Ambassador Krith. High Counselor Dozarin's crystalline form refracted light as he leaned forward. As stated, approaching from the terminus rather than the entrance. "Impossible," stated Commander Vrexil through the communication link from her vessel. "The energy barriers intensify toward the exit. They cannot be penetrated in reverse." Dr. Morrow remained silent, watching as Dax drifted closer to the hexagonal portal. Unlike previous competitors who had fought their way through the beginning sections only to be defeated by the latter obstacles, Dax would face the most challenging portion first. In the void, Dax activated his suit's minimal thrusters, adjusting his trajectory toward what appeared to be an impenetrable energy field. The barrier glowed violent purple, crackling with discharges that had incapacitated multiple previous champions. "Energy levels rising," reported a Confederation technician. "Barrier at maximum repulsion." Dax stopped 10 meters from the barrier, hovering in space. Through his neural interface, he studied the energy patterns, noting the pulses and fluctuations that previous competitors had tried to time their movements around. But Dax wasn't looking for gaps in the barrier. He was looking beyond it. What "Is the human waiting for?" asked Quetzal, who had joined the observers. "He's thinking," Morrow replied, recognizing the slight movements of Dax's hands as he processed information through the neural interface. Suddenly, Dax reached into a compartment on his suit and withdrew what appeared to be a small metallic sphere. With precise calculation, he launched it directly at the center of the barrier. The sphere made contact, and instead of being repelled, it passed through as if the barrier weren't there, disappearing into the hexagonal portal beyond. Gasps erupted across the observation deck. "Impossible!" Commander Vrexel declared. "Our sensors confirm the barrier is active at full strength." Dax didn't hesitate. He activated his thrusters and moved directly toward the seemingly solid energy wall. As he approached, observers leaned forward in anticipation of his inevitable repulsion, but instead, Dax passed through untouched, as if the barrier existed in another dimension. "How?" Ambassador Krith's spines flared in astonishment. Inside the gauntlet, Dax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before focusing on the next challenge. He activated his comms. "The barrier isn't designed to repel. It's designed to filter. It doesn't stop physical objects. It stops conventional thinking." "Explain," demanded Dazrin. "The Aldebrands built this as a perceptual test," Dax replied, moving deeper into the structure. "The barriers only exist if you believe they do. Previous competitors fought against an illusion, exhausting themselves against obstacles that weren't physically real. What followed became a lesson in perceptual physics. Where others had struggled against gravitational shifts designed to disorient, Dax moved through by realigning his internal perception rather than fighting against the external forces. When faced with maze-like crystalline structures that had trapped previous champions for hours, he simply passed through walls that proved solid only to those who approached them as barriers. At each stage, the gathered dignitaries watched in growing astonishment as the human dismantled 87 cycles of assumptions about the gauntlet's fundamental nature. "He's not defeating the obstacles," Quetzal observed quietly to Morrow. "He's refusing to acknowledge them as obstacles at all." "That's Roden," she replied, unable to keep pride from her voice. "He's never met a rule he didn't question." 3/4 through the course, Dax encountered the infamous vortex chamber that had claimed most champions. The spinning crystalline structure generated overlapping gravitational fields that had torn apart exoskeletons and shattered bones. Observers held their breath as Dax approached, and then gasped as, instead of navigating around the vortex, he dove directly into its center. "He's committing suicide," cried Commander Vrexel, but at the heart of the vortex, Dax found what none had discovered before: perfect stillness. The overlapping gravitational forces created a null point where, counter to all expectations, there was no force at all. "The harder path is sometimes an illusion," Dax transmitted as he floated through the eye of the gravitational storm. "Sometimes the most dangerous-looking path is actually the safest." The final section of the gauntlet loomed before Dax, what had traditionally been considered the starting point, but was now his finish line. This region consisted of seemingly simple barriers meant to acclimate competitors before the more complex challenges. Yet as Dax approached, he realized these simple obstacles held a different kind of challenge when encountered in reverse. The observation deck had fallen into stunned silence, broken only by the occasional technical update or exclamation of disbelief. Even Commander Vrexel no longer transmitted objections, her vessel maintaining position alongside the Confederation station. "He's approaching the Genesis chamber," reported a technician. 84% of the course completed. Dr. Morrow leaned forward, tension evident in her posture. The Genesis chamber, a spherical portion of the course filled with constantly forming and dissolving crystal structures, had been designed as a warm-up for competitors. Encountering it last, however, made it potentially the most dangerous segment. Inside, the gauntlet, Dax paused at the chamber's threshold, studying the chaotic formation patterns. When approached from the traditional direction, competitors simply needed to navigate around forming crystals. From his reverse perspective, however, he faced crystals that were dissolving unpredictably, creating jagged fragments that tumbled. Through zero gravity, suit integrity at 98%, Morrow reported. Oxygen levels stable, neural interface experiencing minor lag. 0.3 seconds, Dax acknowledged, with a slight gesture as he continued analyzing the chamber. The formations aren't random, he transmitted. They're responding to thought patterns. High Counselor Dozerin's crystalline form pulsed with interest. Explain. The crystals form based on expected pathways, Dax replied. Previous competitors created obstacles unconsciously by anticipating where barriers would appear. He demonstrated by deliberately thinking about a path to his left. Immediately, crystals began forming to block that route. Then he switched his focus to the right, and new formations appeared there instead. Fascinating, murmured Quetzal. The gauntlet reads neural patterns and manifests physical counterparts. Then how does one proceed? Asked Ambassador Krith. Spines flattened in concentration. Dax didn't reply immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes within his helmet, a gesture that caused concerned murmurs among the observers. "What is he doing?" demanded Commander Vrexel, breaking her silence. "Doctor." Morrow monitored his vital signs. "He's meditating, clearing his mind." Inside the Genesis chamber, something remarkable occurred. As Dax emptied his thoughts of expectation and direction, the crystal formations slowed their frantic assembly and disassembly. The chamber grew, calmer, structures stabilizing into a complex but navigable lattice. With deliberate movements, Dax propelled himself into the chamber, maintaining his mental discipline. Where previous competitors had charged through, creating chaos with their expectations, Dax moved with acceptance of whatever formed around him. The crystals, responding to his mental state, created not obstacles, but waypoints, beautiful, geometric, formations that guided rather than hindered. "It's responding to him," Ambassador Krith observed in wonder. "No," corrected Quetzal. "It's responding to his absence of resistance. The human has understood what my ancestors always taught, that the universe does not conspire against us unless we believe it does." As Dax approached the final segments, the entire observation deck leaned forward. No competitor had ever reached this point from either direction. The entrance to the gauntlet, now Dax's exit, consisted of a simple circular portal that had always been considered merely ceremonial. "Something's happening," reported a technician as Dax approached the portal. "Energy readings are spiking across all spectrums." The portal, dormant for 87 cycles, began to glow with increasing intensity. Symbols appeared along its circumference, Aldebaran script that pulsed in complex patterns. "It's activating," whispered Dozerin. "The portal is recognizing completion." In the void, Dax paused before the glowing ring. "This isn't just an entrance or exit," he transmitted. "It's a communication terminal." The symbols around the portal spun faster, then froze in a specific configuration. A beam of coherent light emanated from the center, scanning Dax from helmet to boots. "Translation matrices are attempting to decode," reported a technician, "but the language patterns don't match any known Aldebaran dialects." "Because it's not language as we understand it," Dax replied. "It's conceptual communication." Through his neural interface, Dax received not words, but impressions, mathematical constants mixed with emotional resonances and spatial coordinates. Information flooded his mind faster than he could process it, overwhelming the neural interfaces. Capacity. His vital signs are spiking, Morrow reported urgently. Heart rate elevated, brain activity off the charts. Extract him, ordered Commander Vrexel. The human is in distress. But before any action could be taken, the portal flashed brilliantly, then faded to dormancy. Dax drifted backward slowly, then activated his thrusters to stabilize his position. Dax. Report status? Morrow demanded, professional demeanor barely masking her concern. After a long moment, his voice came through, strangely calm. I'm all right, Doc. Better than all right. He turned to face the observation deck, visible now through the transparent walls of the station. The gauntlet wasn't just a test. It was waiting for someone to approach it correctly, to understand its true purpose. Which is, asked Dozerin. To find those worthy of the Aldebaran legacy, Dax replied. I know where they went, and why they left this behind. 3 days after Roden Dax completed the gauntlet backward, the Confederation Council chamber filled, beyond capacity. Representatives from all 12 species crowded the tiered seating, with dozens more watching via holographic projection from their vessels. At the center of the chamber stood a platform where Dax, now dressed in the formal blue uniform of the Human Exploratory Alliance, waited beside Dr. Morrow. High Counselor Dozerin called the assembly to order, his crystalline form glowing with formal communication patterns. For 87 cycles, he began, the Aldebaran gauntlet has stood as both challenge and mystery. Lieutenant Roden Dax of Earth has accomplished what many believed impossible, not through superior strength or technology, but through conceptual innovation. Commander Vrexel, seated with the Taurian delegation, maintained a stoic posture. Beside her, Ambassador Krith's spines rippled with excitement, while Quetzal observed from the Avalonian section, appendages folded in respectful attention. The human will now share what was revealed upon completion of the challenge, Dozerin announced, yielding the platform. Dax stepped forward, his expression serious despite the triumph of his achievement. The chamber fell silent. What I experienced at the Gauntlet's portal wasn't just information, he began. It was understanding, a perspective shift as profound as the one needed to complete the course itself. He activated a holographic display showing the Gauntlet's structure, highlighting the portal that had activated at his approach. The Aldebarans didn't vanish because of catastrophe or warfare, as many have speculated. They evolved beyond physical form. The gauntlet wasn't a test of worthiness. It was an invitation to join them, extended only to those who could transcend conventional thinking. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The portal transmitted coordinates, Dax continued, but not to a physical location in normal space. The Aldebarans exist now in what they call the perception realm, a state of existence where consciousness and reality are interchangeable. Preposterous, Commander Vrexel interjected. Consciousness cannot exist without biological substrate. Can't it? Dax challenged. The Aldebarans discovered that consciousness isn't generated by biology, it's merely channeled through it. They learned to transfer their consciousness into a substrate of pure energy, existing in dimensions adjacent to our own. Dr. Morrow stepped forward. We've analyzed the data transmitted to Lieutenant Dax's neural interface. The mathematical constants describe fold points in spacetime where our universe intersects with this perception realm. Are you suggesting, Ambassador Krith asked, spines erect with astonishment, that the Aldebarans wish us to follow them into this transcendent state? Not immediately, Dax clarified. The message was clear that most species aren't ready for such transformation. The gauntlet was designed to identify cultures approaching the conceptual threshold necessary for communication. He gestured to the assembled delegates. The Confederation was formed to promote cooperation and understanding between different perspectives. The Aldebrands witnessed this from their realm and created the gauntlet as a filter, not to find the strongest or fastest species, but the most perceptually flexible. And humanity passed this test where others failed, stated Commander Vrexil, a note of bitterness evident in her translated voice. Not because humans are inherently superior, Dax countered firmly, but because, as newcomers, we approached without the weight of established assumptions. Any species could have solved the gauntlet had they questioned their initial premises. He looked directly at Vrexil. The backward approach wasn't about physical direction, it was symbolic of reversed thinking. The gauntlet doesn't reward those who overcome obstacles through force. It rewards those who recognize when obstacles are self-imposed limitations. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this interpretation. Quetzal rose from the Avalonian section. The human speaks truth that resonates with ancient Avalonian philosophy. We have long taught that perception shapes reality more than reality shapes perception. High Counselor Dozarin's crystalline structure pulsed with diplomatic patterns. What do the Aldebrands offer through this communication channel? Knowledge, Dax replied simply. Access to understanding accumulated over millions of years of post-physical existence. Perspective that could transform our approach to everything from energy generation to interstellar travel. He paused, looking around the chamber. But they offer it conditionally. Not to individual species who might monopolize it, but to the Confederation as a unified entity. They will only communicate with envoys selected from multiple species who can approach problems with complementary perspectives. Gradually, the implications of this announcement rippled through the chamber. Commander Vrexil's posture shifted. Subtly as she processed the information. You suggest, she said slowly, that humanity's admission to the Confederation was not merely fortuitous, but necessary for this breakthrough. I suggest, Dax replied with careful diplomacy, that diversity of perspective is not merely a philosophical ideal, but a practical necessity for advancement. The Aldebrands evolved beyond physical form, not through technological progress alone, but through perceptual evolution. Learning to see beyond what seems obvious. Dr. Morrow activated another holographic display showing the complex mathematical relationships encoded in the portal's transmission. These equations describe methods of consciousness transfer that match theoretical models several of our species have independently developed but never successfully implemented. For hours, the council chambers buzzed with questions, debates, and planning. When the session finally adjourned, Dax and Morrow found themselves surrounded by delegates eager to continue discussion. As they navigated the crowded chamber, Commander Vrexil intercepted them, her forearms arranged in a formal configuration rarely shown to non-Taurians. Lieutenant Dax, she said, her translator conveying grudging respect, I underestimated both you and your species. An understandable error, Commander, Dax replied with a slight smile. We humans specialize in being underestimated. The Taurian. Defense Fleet withdraws its objection to humanity's full membership, she declared formally, and I would be honored to serve on any joint envoy to establish communication with the Aldebrands. As she departed, Morrow raised an eyebrow at Dax. From contempt to collaboration in 3 days. Impressive. Not my doing, he replied, watching the diverse species interacting with new energy throughout the chamber. The gauntlet changed everything, not by being conquered, but by revealing its true purpose. What happens now? She asked. Dax looked around at the Confederation delegates, former rivals now united by possibility, and smiled. Now we take the next leap together. The Aldebrands didn't leave us a finish line, Isolde. They left us a starting point. Outside the viewport, the gauntlet hung in space, its crystalline structure catching starlight, no longer an unconquerable obstacle, but a doorway to understanding that had waited patiently for minds ready to perceive it. In the void between Proxima Centauri's twin stars, the ancient structure pulsed once with energy, acknowledging the beginning of something new, a conversation between what was and what might yet be, between physical limitation and boundless possibility, between 12 distinct perspectives, joined by the simple revolutionary act of looking at a problem backward.